So step one here, first step one, and the lesson learned, at least we, is never sacrifice quality to get a little bit of extra yield. Because those garbage bags were trading at 3.5%. US Treasury bonds were trading at 3.25%. So you were risking all your capital for 1/4%. That's dopey. I mean, I take risks in markets, but I'm going to make a lot more than I'm hoping to make a lot more than 1/4%. And I learned that lesson 100 years ago when I was a young trader at Royal Securities, Atlantic Acceptance. Every investor in Canada got hit in that for an extra 1/4%. So never sacrifice quality to get a little extra yield if you're buying bonds or fixed income instruments. And we only use government bonds. The second lesson is debt is a killer. Debt is a real killer. And in our company, we don't allow clients with margin accounts or anything else like that. I grew up as a trader. I ran trading for Merrill Lynch before I moved to money management. And in 1 year, 5 people I knew in the securities business killed themselves. Young traders, all guys in their 30s, because of debt and loaded up and losing a whole bunch of money. So the two lessons, I think, from the subprime is never sacrifice quality for yield and be very, very careful with debt. Now, there are lots of complex and unquantifiable risk products. Credit default swaps. I mean, you hear these phrases, most people don't. That means I can take out an insurance policy. I own a bunch of bonds from this company, and I can insure them against loss. But what happened, anybody can insure it. So you might have $100 million in debt of a corporation, but somebody may have insured $1 billion in debt that don't even own the bonds. So this became, anyway, it's too complex to get into. So what happened is you had some very complex products that were not fully understood. And that leads to lesson 3. Keep it simple. If you don't understand a product, don't buy it, period. If it's too complex, stay away from it. And the Canadian banks, now we all know banks are evil. However, that having been said, you know, to their credit, I think it was Ed Clark at TD Bank said, I didn't understand these AAA garbage bags, so we didn't play in it. And that actually saved the Canadian banking system. The fact that everybody just stood away from it because it was too complex. And they should be given marks for that. So what happened when this thing collapsed? This was a very, very scary time. If you can recall, Paulson, who was then Secretary of the Treasury, I mean, they were scared. The whole system was freezing, and this was a real mess. And the mood everywhere in financial world is the world is ending. And then coupled with that, right during this time, I'm in New York, I'm at the University Club, I run our New York office, and I'm taking the elevator down in the University Club. This was in around January, a year ago January. And I get on the elevator, and there's an elderly woman on the elevator, and I said, good morning. She looked at me and she said, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. And I said, well, you're absolutely correct. I have a great deal to be ashamed of, but isn't there anything specific that you have in mind? You know, but I didn't realize I had a New York Stock Exchange pin on, and she said, you caused this problem. And I said, madam, there are many villains. I just happen to be one of them. What am I going to say to this woman? She was quite animate. But so it's really amazing in our industry. Our industry has more egomaniacs per square foot than anything else on earth, you know. I mean, I really have to tell you that. But, you know, I always keep joking in our industry. The nice part about humility, if you don't seek it, stick around, it will be coming. And that's what we had. Our industry went from basically arrogance to humility. So this was a really, really scary time, I have to tell you this. Because there was no credit. The banks wouldn't lend money to each other. They didn't know how much of the garbage bags they owned. So everything froze, so they had to pump tremendous amounts of money. And a lot of people believed their own stories, and they were buying the garbage bags, and other people were insuring the garbage bags. So it became complex, and there was no credit. I gave a talk at the Empire Club on January the 8th of last year, and I believe I was the only optimist on the panel. Well, I was, I think. Everybody else was, the world is ending. And, you know, there is always opportunity in adversity. And markets respond to changes in perception, changes in circumstance. It's the change that gives you the lift in markets. So at that time, we tend to come in, I'm a value type of investor. I want to buy big companies when nobody wants them, and that's the only way I can create value for our clients, or one of the few ways. So we were big buyers of the Canadian bank stocks, for example, among a whole bunch of others. The Bank of Montreal yielded 11%. we will never in our lifetime see a Canadian bank stock give an 11% dividend yield. And it was staring at you. And somebody said, well, they're going to cut the dividends. And I said, well, we know banks are evil, but they just did a financing, and they're not tacky enough to do a financing and then cut the dividend. So I think what's happening is you look at managing money and looking at opportunity. The opportunities, the real ones, exist in some form of adversity or uncertainty. And you have to try to get the clarity to see through that and discover and take away what's background noise. And we had a wonderful year in 2009 for our clients. I think we're, depending which pools we were running, I run one of the institutional equity, I think we're 35 to 50%, and because we saw through the adversity to the opportunity. So that's lesson 4. Buy low and sell high. But people don't want to do that. They want to buy high because everybody's optimistic. And then when everything's in the ash can, oh, we want to get out of here now. You've got to reverse your thinking. You've got to, sort of question, examine the prevailing mood. Get beyond all the media. I keep saying the job of the press is to create bargains for us. That's what they do. Not to inform, to create bargains for us. Now, in recent months, we've gone through another kind of crisis. We call it the Club Med. And that's all the Mediterranean countries, the Italy, Greece, Spain, Portugal. Anyway, a lot of these companies just had too much debt on the books, period. And they were, in fact, fudging the books. They were lying to the EU about how much debt they did, in fact, own. But I think one of the things, we cannot be prideful anywhere else in the world. I think Greece and some of these countries, that's the canary in the mine, because I think this is going on worldwide, in that we are really spending too much, particularly in the public sector, and taking on debts just to stay alive. City of Toronto, look at City of Toronto, the amount of our budget that just goes for salaries versus capital spending or whatever else. Everybody has this sense of entitlement, and they have tremendous monopoly power in many of the public sector union organizations. So that's something the world has to watch. So lesson 5, and I'm particularly referring to fudging the books, and that is, if you don't trust a person, don't deal with them, period. And that goes for countries. If you don't trust them, have nothing to do with them. Drive on. Just don't even get near them.